mainstay of the court's liberal wing. His retirement gives President Biden the chance to fulfill a campaign promise and appoint the first black female Supreme Court justice. With us is CBS News chief legal correspondent Jan Crawford. And Jan, first, today is really about Justice Breyer, not who President Biden will pick, correct?
That's right. I mean, this is kind of giving Justice Breyer his moment. And, you know, in that resignation letter that he sent to President Biden, hand-delivered today, he talks about the privilege it's been to really have a lifetime in public service and as a judge. 14 years as an appeals court judge before those 27 years as a Supreme Court justice. And he talks about how that work was both challenging and meaningful and what it meant to him to serve on that Supreme Court. So today, it's all about Justice Breyer, but behind the scenes, the wheels are in motion for who's going to replace him.
A lot of speculation about that, including someone who used to clerk for Justice Breyer.
Yes, and I think Ketanji Jackson, who is a federal appeals court judge here in D.C., might be the sentimental favorite, but there are several other highly qualified African-American women on that short list, including a California Supreme Court justice who is 45 years old, highly respected jurist there, and another South Carolina judge, Michelle Childs, who unfortunately for her is a little older than Kruger. She's 55, but she is being pushed by Jim Clyburn, the influential congressman from South Carolina, because she would bring a different voice, the only non-Ivy Leaguer who would serve on that Supreme Court, a voice that Clyburn says is really needed not only on the court, but also in the Democratic Party.
In fact, just this morning, House Majority Whip Jim Clyburn from South Carolina, who you mentioned, speaking with the Washington Post and really advocating on behalf of Judge Childs, who is scheduled to be before the Supreme Court just next week for another job.
Before the Senate Judiciary Committee, and that gives her another advantage, along with Jackson, because they both have been recently and thoroughly vetted. Jackson also a recent nominee to that D.C.-based federal appeals court, a prestigious court that's considered a feeder to the United States Supreme Court.
You were looking live at the Roosevelt Room in the White House. Let's quickly bring in our White House correspondent, Ed O'Keefe. And Ed, we're talking about that. There, of course, is the president now entering the room. I know you've been talking to your Hill sources, so stand by. First, the President of the United States.
Good afternoon. I begin by recognizing both Dr. Breyer, Dr. Biden, and for being here. And I can't tell you, this is sort of a bittersweet day for me. Justice Breyer and I go back a long way, all the way back to the mid-'70s when he first came on the Judiciary Committee, but that's another story. I'm here today to express the nation's gratitude to Justice Stephen Breyer for his remarkable career of public service and his clear-eyed commitment to making our country's laws work for its people. And our gratitude extends to Justice Breyer's family for being partners in his decades of public service. In particular, I want to thank his wife, Dr. Joanne Breyer, who is here today and who has stood by him for nearly 6 decades. And with her fierce intellect, good humor, and enormous heart. I want to thank you. The country owes you as well. And Stephen Breyer's public service started early. He served in the United States Army as a teenager and in all 3 branches of the federal government before he turned 40. They were the good old days, weren't they? And as he was a law clerk as Supreme Court Justice Goldberg, a prosecutor in the Department of Justice, a member of the Watergate prosecution team. And I first met Stephen Breyer when I was a senator on the Judiciary Committee, and he started off as taking care of one of the subcommittees for Teddy, but then became chief counsel during his tenure as Ted's chairmanship of the Judiciary Committee. Beyond his intellect and hard work and legal insight, he was famous for biking across Washington virtually every day for a face-to-face meeting with a Republican chief counsel, the ranking Republican counsel. And over breakfast, they discussed what would they do for the country together. Whereas in those days, we tried to do things together. That spirit stuck with me when I took over the Judiciary Committee as chair after Senator Kennedy's tenure. And it was my honor to vote to confirm Justice Breyer to serve in the United States Supreme Court, or the Court of Appeals first, in 1980. And then 14 years later, in 1994, I got to preside as chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee over his Supreme Court confirmation hearings. We were joking with one another when he walked in. Did we ever think that he would have served decades on the court and I'd be president of the United States when the day he came in to retire? And he looked at it, anyway, I won't tell you what he said. I'm joking. But I was proud and grateful to be there at the start of this distinguished career in the Supreme Court. And I'm very proud to be here today on his announcement of his retirement. You know, during his confirmation hearings way back in 1994, nominee Stephen Breyer said, quote, "The law must work for the people." He explained to us his faith that our complex legal system has a single purpose: tell people who make up our country. It was a different time, of course, but his brilliance, his values, his scholarship are why Judge Breyer became Justice Breyer by an overwhelming bipartisan vote at the time. Today, Justice Breyer announces his intention to step down from active service after 4 decades on the federal bench and 28 years on the United States Supreme Court. His legacy includes his work as a leading scholar and jurist in administrative law, bringing his brilliance to bear to make government run more efficiently and effectively. It includes his stature as a beacon of wisdom on our Constitution and what it means. And through it all, Justice Breyer has worked tirelessly to give faith to the notion that the law exists to help the people. Everyone knows that Stephen Breyer has been an exemplary justice, fair to the parties before him, courteous to his colleagues, careful in his reasoning. He's written landmark opinions on topics ranging from reproductive rights to health care, to voting rights, to patent law, to laws protecting our environment and the laws that protect our religious practices. His opinions are practical, sensible, and nuanced. It reflects his belief that the job of a judge is not to lay down a rule, but to get it right, Justice Breyer's law clerks and his colleagues, as many of the press here know, describe him and his work ethic, his desire to learn more, his kindness to those around him, and his optimism for the promise of our country. And he has patiently sought common ground and built consensus, seeking to bring the court together. I think he's a model public servant in a time of great division in this country. Justice Breyer has been everything his country could have asked of him. And when he appeared before the Judiciary Committee almost 3 decades ago, we all had high hopes for the mark he would leave on history, the law, and the Constitution. And he's exceeded those hopes in every possible way. Today is his day, our day to commend his life of service and his life on the court. But let me say a few words about the critically important work of selecting his successor. Choosing someone to sit in the Supreme Court, I believe, is one of the most serious constitutional responsibility a president has. Our process is going to be rigorous. I will select a nominee worthy of Justice Breyer's legacy of excellence and decency. While I've been studying candidates' backgrounds and writings, I've made no decision except one. The person I will nominate will be someone with extraordinary qualifications, character, experience, and integrity. And that person will be the first Black woman ever nominated to the United States Supreme Court. It's long overdue in my view. I made that commitment during the campaign for president, and I will keep that commitment. I will fully do what I said I'd do. I will fulfill my duty to select a justice, not only with the Senate's consent, but with his advice. You've heard me say in other nomination processes that the Constitution says seek the advice and consent, but the advice as well of the Senate. I'm going to invite senators from both parties to offer their ideas and points of view. I'll also consult with leading scholars and lawyers. And I'm fortunate to have advising me in this selection process Vice President Kamala Harris. She's an exceptional lawyer, former Attorney General of the state of California, a former member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. I will listen carefully to all the advice I'm given, and I'll study the records and former cases carefully. I'll meet with the potential nominees, and it is my intention to announce my decision before the end of February. I have made no choice at this point. Once I select a nominee, I will ask the Senate to move promptly on my choice. In the end, I will nominate a historic candidate, someone who's worthy of Justice Breyer's legacy, and someone who, like Justice Breyer, will provide incredible service on the United States Supreme Court. Justice Breyer, on behalf of all the American people, I want to thank you and your family for your tremendous service to our nation. And I'm going to yield the floor to you, Mr. Justice.
Thank you, Mr. President. That was terribly nice. And believe me, I hold it right here. It's wonderful. And I thought about what I might say to you, and I'd like to say something I enjoy is talking to high school students, grammar school students, college students, even law school students, and they'll come around and ask me what is it you find particularly meaningful about your job? What sort of gives you a thrill? And that's not such a tough question for me to answer. It's the same thing. Day one almost, up to day I don't know how many. But what I say to them is, look, I sit there on the bench, and after we hear lots of cases, and after a while, the impression, it takes a while, I have to admit, but the impression you get is, as you well know, this is a complicated country. There are more than 330 million people, and my mother used to say it's every race, it's every religion, and she would emphasize this, and it's every point of view possible. And it's a kind of miracle when you sit there and see all those people in front of you, people that are so different in what they think, and yet they've decided to help solve their major differences under law. And when the students get too cynical, I say, go look at what happens in countries that don't do that. And that's there. I can't take this around in my job. People have come to accept this Constitution, and they've come to accept the importance of a rule of law. And I want to make another point to them. I want to say, look, of course people don't agree, but we have a country that is based on human rights, democracy, and so forth. But I'll tell you what Lincoln thought, what Washington thought, and what people today still think. It's an experiment. It's an experiment. That's what they said. And Joanna paid each of our grandchildren a certain amount of money to memorize the Gettysburg Address. And the reason that what we want them to pick up there, and what I want those students to pick up, if I can remember the first two lines, is that 7 years ago, our fathers created upon this here a new country, a country that was dedicated to liberty and the proposition that all men are created equal. Conceived in liberty, those are his words, and dedicated to the proposition that all men are created equal. He meant women too. And we are now engaged in a great civil war to determine whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. See, those are the words I want to see. An experiment. And that's what he thought. It's an experiment. And I found some letters that George Washington wrote where he said the same thing. It's an experiment. That experiment existed then because even the liberals in Europe, they're looking over here and they're saying it's a great idea in principle, but it'll never work. But we'll show them it does. That's what Washington thought. And that's what Lincoln thought. And that's what people still think today. And I say, well, I want you, and I'm talking to the students now. I say, I want you to pick just this up. It's an experiment that's still going on. And I'll tell you something. You know who will see whether that experiment works? It's you, my friend. It's you, Mr. High School student. It's you, Mr. College student. It's you, Mr. Law School students. It's us, but it's you. It's that next generation and the one after that. My grandchildren and their children. They'll determine whether the experiment still works. And of course, I am an optimist, and I'm pretty sure it will. Does it surprise you that that's the thought that comes into my mind today? I don't know, but thank you.
Doctor, I don't know that you've ever been to the White House in the Lincoln bedroom, but I invite both of you to come and stay. The Lincoln bedroom has, against the wall between the windows looking out, a handwritten copy of the Gettysburg Address written by Lincoln in that bedroom, allegedly, the sitting room. And so you got to come and see it. And even if you can't come and stay, bring your grandchildren so they can see it as well. Thank you all so very, very much for being here. And I'm not going to take any questions because I think it's inappropriate to take questions with the justice here. He's still sitting on the bench. And I'm going to give you your mask back. And but you'll have plenty of opportunities to get me later today and for the rest of the week, next week too. So thank you very much. Thank you.
In deference to the moment.
And there, the President of the United States saying this is a bittersweet day for me because he has known Justice Breyer since the 1970s and pointing that out because he wanted to honor Justice Breyer's decades of public service to this nation, including 4 decades on the federal bench, and before that, not only serving in the U.S. military, but also serving in Congress as well. Jan Crawford, you've covered the court for decades, and you know Justice Breyer.
I started covering the court when Justice Breyer joined the court.
Wow.
So I think I'm going to retire too. But that speech, I mean, that was classic Stephen Breyer. And we talk about his many lifetime of public service, but that right there is another public service he provides. He goes out and talks to school groups, legal organizations, colleges, universities about the importance of the rule of law and looking to law to really work through our many differences. As President Biden pointed out, you know, he was a model of civility at a time of great division. And obviously there is great division on the United States Supreme Court, and there has been since Breyer joined that court. But what he has done for that court is try to bridge some of that division. He's known for, you know, kind of walking down the hall and popping his head in the justices' chambers to hash through a case. The other justices don't do that. He has warm, friendly relationships with all of them. He is well-liked, he's engaged, and he had a tremendous impact on that court, not only for his writings and his opinions, but his willingness to listen and engage with his colleagues.
Ed O'Keefe is with us at the White House. And Ed, the president saying he has not made his final decision, but he will by the end of February. But he did make clear what type of person he wants on the Supreme Court.
He sure did, saying he will fulfill a campaign pledge to put a black woman on the court. Got to keep in mind, too, the fact that he reminded us that he's known Justice Breyer since the 1970s. This is a president who campaigned on his foreign policy experience. One could argue, though, he has far more experience in what he's about to launch into, and that is selecting a federal judge to sit, or somebody to sit on the Supreme Court. Since the 1970s, when he joined the Senate, all the way through 2009 when he resigned, every federal judge or Supreme Court justice who was nominated by a president would have passed over Senator Biden's desk. And for 8 years as vice president, he was intimately involved in the process with Barack Obama. So this is somebody who knows what he's looking for, knows the questions to ask, and is going to relish this opportunity. And the idea that he's going to bring in the opinions of his fellow former senators, Senate colleagues, we'll see about that. There has been signals from Republicans that they're not really interested in engaging in this. Lindsey Graham saying that as long as all 50 Democratic senators and the vice president are on board, they don't need Republicans. Let's see if the olive branch is accepted by Republicans and they weigh in and the president listens to them. But we know that there are a handful of names under consideration. Jan mentioned Justice Jackson, who sits here in Washington. Certainly Judge Childs from South Carolina is a sentimental favorite of Jim Clyburn. Leandra Kruger has connections to Vice President Harris because as Attorney General of California, the vice president put Justice Kruger on the High Court of the Golden State. And Candace Jackson Akawumi, another recently confirmed justice to the Court of Appeals in Chicago, is another name to watch as well. The fact that they have been vetted recently by this White House, that the president is more recently familiar with their experience, certainly will be a benefit. But given what he said today, it looks like he may be casting a wide net and is willing to listen to just about anyone.
Ed O'Keefe, thank you. Jan, quickly. Already, half of President Biden's first 16 nominees for the federal appeals courts have been black women. That's as many as all previous presidents combined had appointed. You said last night on the evening news, This appointment will literally change the face of the Supreme Court. Why is that so important?
Well, there have only been 2 other African-American justices, and only one right now serving on the United States Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas, who is the court's most conservative justice. And for liberal African-Americans and Democrats, they say that's almost offensive because Clarence Thomas doesn't speak for us. The fact that there now will be a liberal African-American and woman on the Supreme Court is a tremendous statement in its own right.
Jan Crawford, thank you. Ed O'Keefe, thank you. And our coverage will continue on the CBS News Streaming, your local news, and tonight on the CBS Evening News. This has been a CBS News Special Report. I'm Norah O'Donnell, CBS News, Washington.
For news 24 hours a day, go to cbsnews.com.
And that was a CBS News Special Report in which we heard Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer officially announce his retirement from the bench and President Biden thank him for his long service. You know, Breyer quoted directly from the Gettysburg Address to remind Americans that this country then and now, this democracy, is an experiment. And so when